The history of Africa underwent significant transformations, especially during the era of colonization. In today's video, we will take a closer look at the history of African colonies and explore the impacts that unfolded during this process. By understanding how the colonization of Africa progressed and the results it yielded, we can gain insight into the contemporary situation in Africa and the backdrop of international relations. In the mid-15th century, European explorers began to make contact with the African continent. Portuguese navigators explored the African coast, engaging in trade of gold, ivory, and slaves from Africa. During this period, Portugal established several bases along the African coast and played a crucial role in opening up trade routes to Asia. Utilizing the highly efficient caravel ships, Portugal navigated the African coast and intensified trading activities. Spain also attempted to make contact with Africa while focusing on exploration in the New World, the Americas. But during this time, Portugal primarily expanded its influence in Africa. The slave trade from the African coast began, transporting slaves to work as forced laborers on plantations in the Americas. By the 18th century, competition among European powers for the colonization of Africa intensified. Exploration into the African interior progressed, and European nations sought to expand their territories. In the 1860s, the Berlin Conference was held to determine how to divide the territories of the African continent. At this conference, European nations redrew the map of Africa and formally established their colonial domains. As a result of the Berlin Conference, powers such as France, Britain, Belgium, and Germany divided the African continent and established colonies. France exerted influence over North Africa, while Britain controlled Egypt. King Leopold II of Belgium ruled the Congo as his personal possession, known for its brutal governance, which drew strong condemnation from the international community. When World War I broke out, Africans were mobilized as soldiers in the war. This conflict brought changes to colonial rule, and the post-war international situation influenced Africa's independence movements. After the war, the weakening of European nations and the rising influence of the United States accelerated the independence movements in Africa. From the 1940s to the 1950s, independence movements surged across Africa. Movements for independence unfolded in Egypt, Algeria, Kenya, and many African nations ultimately achieved independence. After independence, African countries began to lay the foundations for new nations while confronting the legacies of colonial rule. Even after achieving independence, the influence of Western countries persisted. Through economic aid and trade relations, Western nations maintained their influence over African policies and economies. Additionally, the borders and social structures formed during the colonial era became factors that posed political challenges post-independence. In modern Africa, economic development and social change are progressing, yet the impacts of colonization remain deeply entrenched. Facing challenges related to international relations and economic issues, African nations continue to seek their own paths. The colonization of Africa has historically had a profound impact. The economic and social structures formed during the colonial era continue to influence modern Africa. Although Africa has been liberated from European domination, it still faces many challenges, yet it has entered a new era of self-determination.